Welcome to day one of our 12 days of Act 10. Our first lesson is going to be about the golden rule, marginal benefit equals marginal cost, and about trade-offs in general. I'm kind of sick, so it's hard for me to talk, so I might have to cough or stop now and then. Please bear with me. So there were two principles of economics that really stood out for us in the first chapter that we used over and over and over again. The first principle was that people face trade-offs. When you make choices and you go to the store and you spend money, you can get stuff. For instance, you could buy a new phone, but you're going to have to give up money, or you're going to have to not be able to buy something else, or you're going to at the very least have to give up that time to go to the store. So there's going to be costs and benefits to everything you do. And the second principle is that you need to have a way of making choices that are good, and our way of making choices that are good is that we think at the margin. Think at the margin. So the first principle tells us we have to make choices, and the second principle tells us how to make good choices. Again, this is not good in the sense of you have to do things this way. It's more tautological, like if you do things this way, it indicates that it was a good choice. That's not really that important. So when we think at the margin, we think about marginal changes. Remember that a marginal change is when you get a little bit more. For instance, the costs you pay when you produce a little bit more output, or it could be just going the opposite way, a little bit less. For instance, you would get some extra revenue maybe if you produced a little bit less and you raised the price. So for example, we had our marginal cost. That was the change in costs when we had a small change in our quantity we produced. Our marginal revenue was our small change in revenue when we had a small change in output. We had our marginal product of labor. That was our change in output when we had a small change in our amount of labor we use. We had our marginal utility. That was our change in utility when we had a small change in the amount of X of good we consumed. We could also have marginal utility from good Y. That would be our change in utility from a small change in the amount of good Y we're consuming. So now we get to the Star-Lord principle. The Star-Lord principle is basically just an easy way to remember that we always face trade-offs. So you've probably seen Guardians of the Galaxy. At the end of the movie, Star-Lord says that we could do something that's a little good, a little bad, or a little both. All choices in economics have a little good and a little bad. So there's always going to be some benefits here on the left of the scale. We'll use green for benefits. There's always going to be something good that weighs on the scale for that trade-off, and there's always going to be something bad. Whatever that bad thing is, we're always just going to call it a cost, and whatever that good is, we're just going to call it a benefit. And we'll always have a little of each, and we have to weigh the two against each other. The golden rule is what we use to weigh the good against the bad to make a good choice. Because we're usually not looking at a discrete choice, where we're either going to do it or not do it, and we can look at the costs and benefits directly. We're usually looking at a choice of, we're going to do it, how much what should we do? So for instance, we're running a business, how much should we produce? We could produce 5 units, 10 units, 13 units. What would make 5 or 10 or 13 the best, as opposed to 14 or 12 or 7? And the rule we used over and over and over again, although we never quite said this explicitly, was the golden rule. At the bottom, marginal benefit equals marginal cost. We'll look at the 4 or 5 different forms we've used this in class a few slides from now, but I'll just give a little bit of history of this golden rule. The golden rule was not known until around 1500, so it was discovered around 1500 by 2 people, Pierre Fermat, an amateur mathematician in France, and Isaac Newton, the greatest economist in history. And you might say to yourself, I thought Newton was a mathematician or a physicist. He was, but he was also a great economist who discovered the golden rule, which is really the most important thing in economics. So in a way, Isaac Newton was the world's greatest economist. So first, let's talk about why the golden rule works. Well, there's 2 possibilities aside from marginal benefit equals marginal cost. You could have marginal benefit above marginal cost, but if this was true, then you're not really maximizing benefits minus cost. You're not really making good use of the resources, because if you're getting more benefits than cost at the margin, you should make more, do more, a little more. Whatever it is you're doing, you should do more of it, because you'll get more benefits than the cost by doing a little bit more, and if you get more benefits than cost, then by definition you should be doing it. The other possibility is that marginal cost is less than marginal benefit. In this case, you kind of screwed things up. You're paying higher costs at the margin than you're getting benefits, so you should do less. You've done too much. So for instance, if you looked at your factory one day and you realized you were paying a cost of $15 to produce that last computer, and you sold it for, say, $12 in revenue, that was your benefit, then you should have never built that computer in the first place, so you should really do less and get back to a point where marginal costs are not above marginal benefit. So if you can't have marginal benefit above marginal cost, and you can't have marginal cost above marginal benefit, the first indicates it's bad because you're doing too little, you should do more. The second indicates it's not good or not optimal because you're doing too much, you should do less. The only possibility left is that you got to have marginal benefit equals marginal cost. And this is the origin of the golden rule. Isaac Newton's the first person who really thought that through and figured it out. Fermat did something very similar, so we give him partial credit. So a few examples and applications of the golden rule. Suppose we're going to maximize profit. So we're thinking of how can we get as much revenue minus cost as possible. Our benefit is revenue, so our marginal benefit is going to be MR. And our cost we just called cost, so our marginal cost we called marginal cost. So our golden rule says set those equal. And of course, we've used this rule many times to find the Q that's going to maximize our profit. So suppose we wanted to maximize social surplus. Well, we call the good things produced by the market social benefit, so SB. So our good thing, our marginal benefit, is going to be called marginal social benefit, and we called our cost a social cost. So our marginal cost was called marginal social cost, and when we wanted to maximize social surplus to get that efficient quantity, we just look for where marginal social benefit equal marginal social cost. Suppose we're hiring workers, so we're trying to maximize profit from hiring workers. So instead of looking at picking a quantity, we're picking a number of workers to hire. Well, the benefit from those workers was the value of their marginal product, which we called marginal revenue product. And the cost of hiring those workers was their wage, W. So we said, well, we'll hire workers until marginal revenue product equals the wage. You want to stop at that point because if you hire workers whose wage is above their marginal product, you're losing money. But you'd want to keep going if it was marginal revenue product above wage, because then you could get a profit, like a net profit, off those workers hired. Basic same logic of all the golden rule applications. And then we talked about utility. Our marginal benefit from consuming a good was that we got a little marginal utility. So if that good was called X, we called it MUX. And then we paid a cost to use that good, the price of good X. But on the left here we have utility units per unit of X, and on the right we have dollars per unit of X. So that's not right. So we need some conversion factor. You'll learn about the conversion factor in 1010. So I'll just put one in there. But we do need to convert units. So there will be this lambda conversion factor. And then we had another application of the golden rule with good Y. We need to have marginal utility from Y equals the price of Y. The cost of Y is the price you pay for a unit of it times the conversion factor. And then when we divided these two by each other, we got the bang for the buck principle. So combine and divide. So these are most of the applications of the golden rule we used in the course. Occasionally you might be asked to use more of them, but I think this pretty much covers it. So in summary, economics is about choices. All choices involve trade-offs. They involve benefits, which I like to make green because it's Christmassy, and costs I like to make red because it's Christmassy. So all choices involve benefits and costs. When you're trying to figure out how to balance those benefits against costs, you use marginal benefit equals marginal cost. And there's a good reason for this rule. We didn't just pull it out of our ass. So remember the logic behind why we use MB equals MC, and remember all the different many applications. If you can remember these two principles of economics, it should unify most of the material you saw in the firm behavior unit, consumer choice unit, and public finance unit on externalities, all sort of get together in one unified framework. And hopefully that makes it feel like you're not having to memorize a whole bunch of equations. You're really just memorizing applications of a single equation. Thanks for watching. You'll see day 2 posted probably a few hours from now, or maybe tomorrow.